Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. Today we turn our attention to Uzbekistan, a state at once central in Central Asia and yet, as it were, doubly separated from the sea. I am Professor Alexei and with me is Priyanka. Together we will try to replace a few clichés with structure and evidence.
Hi everyone, I'm Priyanka. I'm excited and humbled to learn more about a place that sits at so many crossroads of history and geography.
To frame our discussion, in lay terms, Uzbekistan is a large, populous country in the heart of Central Asia, bordered by Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan. It is one of only two doubly landlocked states on the planet, the other being Liechtenstein, which means that a container leaving Tashkent must cross at least two national borders before it even smells salt air. Logistics is thus a contact sport. Neighbors and rail corridors matter intensely.
Maybe the best place to begin is by asking a simple question. If you cannot get to the sea directly, how do you grow an economy? You negotiate. You invest in rail, roads, and pipelines. You keep relations functional with every neighbor, because every neighbor is a gate to the wider world. It's like chess. You cannot queen a pawn unless all the intervening squares are safe.
In scientific terms, Uzbekistan sits inside endorheic basins, hydrologically closed systems where rivers such as the Amudarya and Sirdarya do not reach an ocean but terminate in the Aral Sea basin. It is crucial to understand that in such systems, water mismanagement accumulates locally. Salinity rises, return flows carry agrochemicals, and dust from desiccated lake beds can travel hundreds of kilometers. The climate is sharply continental, hot, dry summers, cold winters, and scant rainfall, which makes irrigation and reservoirs the scaffolding of agriculture and cities. This geography then interacts with political economy, forcing investment in canals, transboundary water diplomacy, energy exports, and administrative capacity for resource allocation.
So, moving on. Why does all this matter right now? Uzbekistan is the most populous country in Central Asia, with over 38 million people, and it borders all four of its regional peers. That makes it a natural hub for trade routes linking China, Russia, South Asia, and the Caspian region, and also a key player in regional diplomacy and security, especially along the short but sensitive border with Afghanistan.
Historically, one misunderstanding deserves an early correction. The Aral Sea did not simply evaporate as a quirk of nature. It collapsed under the weight of deliberate irrigation expansion for cotton from the 1960s onward. We observe a chain of causality: river diversions, canal leakage, salinization, and ultimately a new desert, the Aralkum, whose salt and dust now impose measurable public health and agricultural costs. This is an engineered disaster, not an inevitable one. Now, a few essentials to anchor us. Uzbekistan shares the rare status of being doubly landlocked with Liechtenstein, yet it is vastly larger and more complex. It is also the largest electricity producer in Central Asia, powered primarily by natural gas from Soviet-era plants that continue to anchor the grid, with hydropower as a secondary source. Administratively, the country comprises 12 regions: Tashkent City and the Autonomous Republic of Karakalpakstan, whose proximity to the desiccated Aral Basin gives it a distinct environmental and social profile. Uzbek is the official language. Russian and Tajik remain significant, and the population density peaks in the Fergana Valley and in cities such as Tashkent, Samarkand, and Bukhara.
On the timeline, 1924 saw the creation of the Uzbek Soviet Socialist Republic, embedding the territory within Soviet institutions. In 1991, Uzbekistan declared independence, and by the end of that year, Islam Karimov became the first president. After his death in 2016, Shavkat Mirziyoyev assumed office and has since emphasized economic reforms, introduced currency convertibility in 2017, and adopted a friendlier regional posture. There are also critical events to remember: the 1966 Tashkent earthquake, the 2005 Andijan events, which remain disputed, and the 2020 Sardoba Dam collapse. The United Nations also reported major progress against forced labor in the cotton harvest in 2020. Meanwhile, Tashkent has ranked among the most pollutive cities globally in the early 2020s, with particulate matter levels many times higher than WHO guidelines.
Before we get to the complexities, a brief personal note. I first became enamored of Uzbekistan while studying the Timurid Renaissance. Samarkand under Timur and his heirs fused Persianate scholarship with Turkic literary creativity. Ulugh Beg's observatory remains, to my mind, a monument to empirical ambition, a star chart in brick and mortar. One visits for the architecture, but one returns for the civilizational palimpsest. Layers of Achaemenid, Islamic, Mongol, and Soviet inscriptions on the same landscape. This logically leads us to three framing questions. First, how did Soviet irrigation policy reshape land, water, and livelihoods? Second, counterfactually, what trajectories might have followed a fully independent investigation into the 2005 Andijan events? Third, where are current political reforms headed, given persistent assessments that categorize the system as authoritarian? Let us take them in order. Big question one. The Soviet period prioritized cotton, the so-called white gold, with massive canal systems and reservoir projects that diverted the Amu Darya and Sir Darya. From the 1960s, the Aral Sea began to retreat, fisheries collapsed, soils accumulated salts, and Karakalpakstan experienced some of the most severe health burdens in the region. Today, agriculture still consumes roughly 84% of national water, much of it lost to evaporation and leaky canals, while climate change intensifies heat and water stress. The environmental footprint became a development constraint, not merely a side effect.
I'm curious about the farm-level consequences. How did this affect Uzbekistan's agriculture over time, in terms of what farmers grow and how they irrigate?
We can infer several shifts. First, diversification away from strict cotton monoculture toward wheat and higher value horticulture, though cotton remains significant economically and symbolically. Second, technology adoption, lining canals, drip and sprinkler systems, salinity management, and seed research for heat and salt tolerance. Third, governance evolution, water user associations, pricing reforms, and cross-border coordination, because in an endorheic system, upstream and downstream are inseparable. It is worth noting that international monitoring has reported major progress against forced labor since 2020, which removes one barrier to integrating farm supply chains with global buyers. But water efficiency and soil rehabilitation renew binding constraints. In simpler terms, crops must now fit the hydrology, not the other way around.
Building on that, given projected heat and water stress, can we say cotton becomes riskier while some grains or vegetables might fare better, at least in the short run?
Arguably, yes, with two caveats. Model ensembles suggest cotton and certain high-revenue fruits face negative impacts, while maize, potatoes, rice, watermelons, and wheat could see mixed or context-dependent outcomes under temperature and CO2 changes. Yet water scarcity and salinity may offset theoretical gains. The second caveat is market access. Diversification succeeds only if logistics, cold chains, and standards allow produce to reach consumers profitably. a non-trivial challenge for a doubly landlocked exporter. Big question 2. The counterfactual regarding Andijan in 2005 must be handled with methodological restraint. The events remain disputed. Western governments and rights organizations called for an independent investigation. Authorities rejected those calls and emphasized security narratives. Consequences followed. The United States was ordered to vacate the Karshi-Khanabad Air Base. Ties cooled, and Tashkent pivoted toward partners that privileged sovereignty and non-interference. Now the what if. Had there been a credible, transparent inquiry coupled with early political openings, Uzbekistan might have deepened engagement with Western institutions sooner, potentially accelerating regulatory alignment, judicial reform commitments, and trade integration, including progress on WTO accession. But counterfactuals are not predictions. They are structured thought experiments to illuminate constraints and choices.
What if we thought about it like this? Would that alternative path have changed the economic policy mix? For example, the timing of currency convertibility or the pace of market reforms?
Possibly, though not deterministically. Earlier rapprochement could have brought investment, technical assistance, and conditionality that nudged macroeconomic liberalization sooner, perhaps advancing currency reform before 2017 and accelerating transparency in state-owned enterprises. Labor and human rights benchmarks might have embedded earlier, reducing reputational risk in sectors like cotton. Yet geography and security imperatives would still have encouraged multi-vector diplomacy with Russia, China, the EU, and regional bodies such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. In this context, the most we can say is that the reform tempo and sequencing could have shifted, not the fundamental need to balance among great powers and neighbors. Big question 3. Where are democratic reforms headed? Since 2016, the administration has emphasized modernization, anti-corruption, and better relations with neighbors in Europe, while advancing notable economic steps such as full currency convertibility and a reboot of WTO accession talks in 2020. At the same time, independent indices as of 2024 still classify Uzbekistan as a closed autocracy, with constrained civil liberties, limited political pluralism, and weak judicial independence. And the criminalization of same-sex relations persists. This duality produces what we might call a hybrid narrative: policy liberalization without systemic democratization.
I often think the bottlenecks are institutional. What are the key challenges to deeper reforms, the kind that would change those democratic indicators meaningfully?
Fundamentally, they include independence of courts, safeguards for media and association, credible competition among political parties, and predictable constraints on the executive and security services. Electoral administration, campaign finance transparency, and protections for minority rights are likewise central. There is also the administrative state itself, capacity to implement rules fairly across regions and sectors, from environmental permitting to labor inspections, as the Sardoba Dam failure reminded us that safety and oversight are not abstractions. For researchers, the agenda is to track institutional depth and durability, not only the promulgation of new laws, but their enforcement across time and space, and to compare sequences of reform that have worked in other post-authoritarian cases, while remaining attentive to Uzbekistan's unique geography and demography.
To shift gears a bit, air quality has become a social issue people feel every day. Tashkent's particulate matter levels have stayed far above WHO guidance in recent years, from vehicles, heating fuels, construction, and also salt dust from the Aral seabed. Policy fixes seem to require cleaner fuels, vehicle standards, urban planning, and cross-border landscape stabilization. It makes me wonder whether environmental progress might become a bridge to broader civic participation, since clean air is an interest voters share regardless of ideology.
That is to say, environmental governance can be a practical on-ramp to institutional trust. When citizens observe measurable improvements in air or water, compliance and participation tend to rise, and that administrative muscle can later support more delicate reforms. In simpler terms, fix the visible, earn the mandate to fix the structural. In conclusion, Uzbekistan is a doubly landlocked, hydrologically closed, strategically placed state whose history runs from Sogdian traders to Timurid astronomers to Soviet engineers. Its present is defined by trade corridors, energy grids, and the hard arithmetic of water in an arid climate. We have examined three questions: the legacy of Soviet irrigation and the Aral Sea collapse, the counterfactual of an independent Andijan inquiry and its possible implications, and the open trajectory of political reforms within a still authoritarian assessment.
So, I guess that kind of sums it up. A country boxed in by land, yet connected by rails and rivers that never reach the sea, trying to align growth with resilience and rights. Maybe that is why Central Asia's wider geopolitics, from the SCO to EU ties, feels so present in every Uzbek policy debate.
This concludes our lecture for today. We encourage you to read further, from the Timurid observatories to contemporary water diplomacy, because the footnotes here are as interesting as the headlines. Until next time, be well, and remember that in endorheic basins, every drop counts twice.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you all for listening.